Thank you so much. Good morning, everybody. Today we are back after a great chat last week, and we're really looking forward to today. I think it's going to be a bit more of a technical conversation than what we kind of talked about last week, as we kind of dive into the journey of New York wine as it moves from producer to distributor to retailer, and we're going to highlight both successes and challenges along the way. And so we've got a wonderful panel with us once more. And so we're just going to introduce everybody for those who weren't on the call last week. And we'll just go around and we'll say who you are, what you do, and why you're excited to be a part of this chat. Our new guest this week is Katie Roller, the portfolio manager for New York State with O-Pee-Chee Family Distribution. Hey, Katie, how are you?
Hi, good morning. Doing well. Glad to be here. For those of you that don't know me, like Dan said, I'm Katie Roller. I think I know many of you since I've been a part of the Finger Lakes wine industry for going on 14 years now. Started on the supplier side, first with Finger Lakes Wine Alliance, then with Wagner Vineyards, and now I've been with O-Pee-Chee, which is now RNDC New York, since 2018 for almost 7 years now. So a lot of experience on both sides and hoping I can add value to the conversation.
Thanks so much for being here. Next, we have Michael Carrera, owner of Michaeltown Wine and Spirits in Brooklyn Heights. Michael, how are you?
How are you? Good morning. Thanks for having us again today. Wonderful conversation last week. So I'm Michael Carrera. I own Michaeltown Wines in Brooklyn, New York. I've been in the business for about 30 years myself, my family, third generation, and I also run an executive director of Metropolitan Package Store Association.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Next, we got Matt Yeager, owner of Pinnacle Wine and Liquor in Rochester. Matt, welcome back.
Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is Matt Yeager. I've been in the wine business really my whole life. My family owns and operates Pinnacle Wine Liquor in Rochester. The store was actually originally founded in 97 under a different name, and we moved to a new location in 2012. And ever since then, I've been involved in the business, and yeah, we love curating the entire shop, working with New York wines, and just really excited to hopefully find some solutions and talk about some opportunities with logistics today.
Thanks, Matt. We have Chad Henriksen, the brand ambassador for Lakewood Vineyards. Chad, how are you? Good morning.
Good morning, everybody. Yeah, Chad Hendrickson here. I've been with Lakewood since 2004. Happy to be a part of this conversation.
Thank you, Chad. We have Yancey Stanforth Migliori, co-founder of White Cliff Vineyards. Yancey, how are you? Yancey's still having a few technical difficulties, but we're thrilled to have you here as well. And I'm Dan Belmont. For those of you that don't know me, I am London-based. It's afternoon for me here. I run Good Wine, Good People. We're a boutique e-commerce retailer. We stock more New York State wine than any other retailer in the UK. Not that that's a particularly high bar to cross, but we're really happy and excited to plant that flag. We do some importing as well and distribution. Here in the UK, it's a bit like the wild, wild west by comparison. I'm able to be an importer, distributor, retailer, brick and mortar, drink-in operation owner if we get there, and you could do it all under the same license. So I'm really excited about this conversation because I'm going to learn a bit more about the New York side of things. When I was living in New York City, I ran the education program for Murray's Cheese there. As we were selling grocery items, we were not able to sell wine or spirits. We had beer and cider. And so we work directly with retailers to supply our education program. And so a lot of this will be new to me as well, and really excited to dig into it. So we're going to go right into our chat here with Katie. We're going to start with you, just throwing you to the wolves because you're new this week. tell us, what are you looking for in a producer partner for your portfolio?
Ooh, loaded question, Dan. So there's several things, of course, that we look for in a portfolio partner. One of them is the quality of wine, but that is not the whole picture at all. And that is, as all of us know, there is a ton of wine being sold in the country, in the state, in the world, and only a small amount of it is actually really high quality. So quality of wine is definitely one thing, but resources, and not necessarily just financial resources. What I mean by that is a lot of people there's kind of a I don't want to say a lie, so we'll say a myth that has been conveyed since at least when I came into the industry way back in 2011, that when you go into distribution, that makes your life easier, and that is something that gets taken off of your plate. And so that's one of the first things that I say to anybody that's looking to get into distribution. In New York State, especially because, as you guys know, being in the thick of it, we're in, like, the market is the most competitive that it's ever been. So you really have to have your ducks in a row, and you really have to dedicate time and energy into your wholesale business if you want it to be successful. So for people who are thinking, I want to get into distribution, I want a distributor because that's going to make my life easier, you're telling yourself a lie. That's not the truth. You now gave yourself an additional audience that you need to market to. Prior to having distribution with a third-party distributor, you're self-distributing. So you are really just going direct to your customers. And when I say that, you're going direct to trade. And also you're meeting consumers along the way too. So you're really thinking only about, and a lot of times I would say people who have never been in distribution are only thinking about the end consumer, which is very important, of course, because the supplier has to create pull-through to pull those wines off the shelf. But when you get distribution and you're part of a distributor, you now also have to have a new audience to market to, and that is the sales team and the organization. So you need to really be thinking about, how can I come to the table with all of the tools that the rep needs to sell this in, especially knowing that that rep is not walking in there or starting their day every day with your brand top of mind. And how do you get them to think about you? Because they have a lot of items in their bag. They have a lot of priorities for their own well-being. Sales reps are pretty much 100% commission. So you have to be thinking about, what tools can I give this rep so that my wine is an easy sell into the account? So that is the biggest thing I would say.
Katie, last week I think a lot of folks were looking to get into the nitty gritty. Can you give an example of some of those tools that you find most helpful?
Yeah, so in New York State, they make it hard on us. We have a lot of SLA regulations, a lot of things that, to your point, that we can't do here. You can't be, unless you are a farm winery license, you cannot be a producer, have a winery and distribute. You guys are in a really kind of unique position that New York State farm wineries are able to do that. But so in New York, when we think about competitiveness and how the levers that we can pull to make something more desirable or easy to come off the shelf, we only have a couple of things. So that is pricing. We can use pricing as a tool. We can use POS, and I'm speaking retail specifically, not necessarily on premise. So POS being marketing pieces, and that's in the form of case cards, shelf talkers, sell sheets for the reps, easy to access sell sheets for the reps so that they aren't reaching out to either me or to the winery representative the day of, 10 minutes before they're going into an account saying, where do I find this sell sheet? And so within that, I would say a trade website is very important, easily accessible with all of your tools there, bottle shots, shelf talkers again, any points, accolades that you have, and having that all ready to go in a place that I don't have to reach out to you for it, that I can get it myself or a sales rep can get it themselves. Another popular one in New York State and Western New York especially is mail-in rebates. Buffalo, New York is I'm sure everybody on this call knows because we talk about it all the time. It's the highest redeeming MIR redemption area in the country is Buffalo, Western New York area. So that's a lever. And then being able to provide in-store tastings is really important because you go into a buyer, and again, especially when it comes to New York State products, I would say that I would put this at a really high priority level, because you go into Matt, you go into Michael, you taste them on these wines. They love the wines. They know they're awesome wines. They want everyone to drink these wines. But Matt and Michael can't taste every single person in their store on this wine. So when you're making a placement, not only, and I know because I was on the supplier side too, you go in, you make a placement in retail, they took in 3 SKUs and you're like, boom, got it, like winning. And then, 2 months later, you see they haven't reordered. And then you talk to the account and it's just sitting on the shelf. And sometimes it's sitting on the shelf for 6 months and sometimes it's up to a year. And then you're looking at, okay, now my product's getting discontinued and they're not going to use it anymore, even though they know it's very high quality, a great wine, but they had no tool to get it to pull off the shelf. And a lot of times we say, liquid to lips. You got to get liquid to lips, because once you do, then people know why they're paying $25 for a bottle of Finger Lakes Riesling or a bottle of Finger Lakes, $30 for a bottle of Finger Lakes Cab versus $9.99 for the California Cab that's mass produced and there's millions and millions of bottles out there.
Sure. Yeah, tasting is believing, no doubt about it.
Yes.
Thanks, Katie. I'm going to go to Chad just because we want to kind of set the stage with everybody's kind of different relationships here. How did Lakewood come to work with your distributor? Let's just kind of start there, I think.
Yeah, so we work with Empire merchants, both upstate, and we work with Empire Metro down in the city. And we actually had a relationship with O-Pee-Chee when O-Pee-Chee just initially formed, and it just wasn't a great fit. No disrespect to Katie or the company. So we switched over to Empire, and it's been it was a slow start with them. As I think it would be with any distributor, right? You're the new kid on the block, and frankly, Empire is a giant book. So you have to kind of, to Katie's point, you have to make yourself known. And that was a long stretch of limited shelf space, limited sales. But through the years, we've established a good relationship with them. I've gotten to know, the management team, the regional sales managers, the sales managers that directly work with the sales rep, and I've gotten to know most of the sales reps. So that is not an easy thing to do. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of effort on the part of the producer, and that comes at an expense. So that I think people need to be very acutely aware of that it is an expensive venture to get into working with a wholesaler, in our opinion, the correct way. Along with those relationships, we had to get to know the buyers, the owners of both the on-premise market that we're trying to tackle and the off-premise market that we're trying to tackle. And those relationships change constantly, right? I would say less so with the off-premise market. That seems to be a pretty stable group of people who, to Matt and Michael's point, they've been there forever. So once you get to know them, you've kind of got a solid relationship, hopefully. The on-premise market is a whole nother world. The
very unstable people.
Very unstable. I don't know if it's the people, but just the organizations, they seem to switch over pretty quick. So, that is a constantly evolving. I mean, I'm down in the metro market now, and I always say, I'm down here every 4 or 5 months, and I'm completely reinventing the wheel every time I'm down here because it's a whole different market, different people. It's kind of crazy. But to answer your question, our relationship with Empire, like I said, started slow, but now we have a very good relationship overall with them. We've seen our sales increase year over year. I think because of our relationship with them. To Katie's point again, I think first of all, you have to have kind of thick skin in this market, right? There's a lot more no's than yeses. And you kind of need to listen to your reps. You need to listen to the managers that you're dealing with. They're going to kind of give you the best advice as to how to tackle each market that you're getting into and each person that you meet. What's a good time to meet with them? Do they even want to see you, or do they just want to see the rep? There's a lot of variability there, and you just need to go with it. You need to kind of take a step back and just make it work for the situation that's in front of you. I agree with Katie as well. For a long time I was anti on-premise or doing tastings. To me, a lot of times it felt like I'm going in and I'm selling the product that a retailer just bought for them, right? Because technically it's their product once they buy it from us. But the reality is it's important to do them at some point to both establish the relationship with the store owners, but also to get the wine out there and get people to taste it, because that's really how it's going to come off the shelf. So we don't do rebates. We've never done rebates. I'm sure that that's a good idea, but for the size of winery that we're at, it just isn't financially feasible. But on our website, we do have a trade and media section, and that has everything that we feel like you would need. The bottle shots, it has shelf talkers. We have sell sheets, everything you could want. We have like recipes that may go with the wine. We try and pull it all out, all the awards that we've won for the particular vintage and past vintages. And that seems to work well. Once I can get that information to the salespeople and they use it, it works very, very well for us. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, very much so. Chad, what would you say percentage-wise of your time and your role is dedicated to the relationship management with your distributor?
Oh man, I would say a solid 60%. It almost, for me right now, it's more important to make sure that the relationships that I have with the sales force and the management team is really solid. We all know, we've all been there. Some of the sales team that you run into are fabulous. They really like what you're doing. They like the product. They are really interested in selling it. And then you run into those that really, you feel like, you've made the appointment to work with a sales rep through the management team, and they're kind of pissed that you're with them for the day. So you get both ends of it. So my goal is to make sure that we're friendly with everybody that we're dealing with, and understand that we're out there to sell our product, and we're proud of what we're selling, and we want you to be proud of what you're selling too. But easier said than done.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Yancey, I want to talk with you. Welcome. You are our self distributor here on the chat. What do you see as the top benefits of being self-distributed?
Margin. In a word, it's you're not sharing the profits on what is already a very narrow profit margin in our business, as we all know. So that just spoke to us from the very beginning. And we've been, we're a small family farm-based winery, and we've been at it 25 years. I've been doing the self-distribution wholesale thing for about 24 of those years. And it's worked for us because we are in the mid-Hudson Valley. So there are millions and millions of people a short drive away. And, if I were in a more remote location, I'm not sure it would make sense. But I also am from Manhattan. So I'm happy to drive down here and spend time here. I have a harder time with Albany because I don't know it so well. Um, I think another primary benefit is that your relationship is just simply direct. You don't have the added relationship to build with the distributor. You're just focusing on the stores and the restaurants. And I joke that you're dealing with a family business when the owner delivers. I'm often the one who actually delivers after I get the sale. And it seems funny on the one hand, but on the other hand, it just keeps me connected and knowing what's going on with the account. I would say the biggest challenge is just figuring out where to go, who to go to. Distributors are out there on the road all the time. They know who might be interested. I'm trying to figure out, like, in many stores simply don't have an interest in New York wine. It's a tough sell. So I'm usually trying to do the homework to figure out, do they have one or two? Are they open to it? I've also tended to look for a little representation here, a little there, spread it out geographically. Like in New York City, I think in terms of neighborhoods. Am I in the Upper East Side? Am I on the Upper West Side, and so forth? Because I can't be everywhere. That's my start.
Great. Thank you for that. I want to turn over to our retailers, and we'll start with Michael. Michael, first off, we did just have a question in the chat about shelf talkers, and I want to know if you do use them and what makes a great shelf talker for you in terms of outline. And then I want to talk more about your relationships with your distributors.
Sure. Shelf talkers. I go from the old school of, if it's a Bordeaux, putting the Parker right up, 2020, great year. People look at that. I don't know how important that is as it used to be, especially scores and putting. I actually reproduce it. I actually sometimes do my own shelf talker as well. Just write something simple like spicy, bold, fruity, and it turns wine. I go in spurts when I have the time to get a magic marker out and laminate some things, and I do think it's helpful. Sometimes reproduce things are less successful. Sometimes just in your, but it conveys the sales tool of like excitement. So, and if I'm excited, I would never put my name on something or write something unless I really liked it personally myself. Of course. So, and most of the wine, I have two categories of wine in the store. I have wines that people ask for that I may not normally drink myself, and then I have wines that I'm curating for my customers. And I'm not opposed to carrying products that I know are successful, but I when I curate wines and spirits, it usually is something that I first thought an interest in. So getting to this relationship with the wholesalers. There's a number of things that run through my head when we're talking about this, and so indulge me for a moment. Fascinating technology. We are now putting more and more orders through websites. Wholesalers have their own websites. There's ProV that also is helpful. So sometimes we don't speak to people or salespeople as much as we used to. The days of the sales call where once a week they came in, write an order for the week, and then come back next week, I think are pretty much over. So what ends up happening is good sales reps, instead of trying to get reorders of products, or actually want to talk about new products or opportunities. So I think those sales reps are very helpful to people like me. I love learning about new items. I ask questions all the time. I trust the good salespeople to bring me information to me, and I love to learn about new things, new areas. So, for instance, in this whole conversation that we've been having over the last week, I did some research, and I think there's almost 10 subgroups of, like, there's the Hudson Valley and all these different areas. I never really understood much about that. And I think there's even some associations that represent them. I actually got something in the mail from Wine Insider, and I noticed something about New York. So it just spurs my interest in talking about this. And I think relationships like the winemakers on this call, whether you're self-distributed or not self-distributed, the key is, obviously, in my opinion, if you have a good sales rep, they're going to introduce you to accounts that want to listen. Not the old 80-20 rule, right? 80% of the wine is sold by 20% of the stores. I think this isn't just even about New York State wine. This is about good wine. If you have great wine to sell, I, as a retailer, want to know about it so I can turn my customers on it. That's what makes my customers, my friends. They support me and they support our business, and I want to turn them on to something new and exciting that tastes great. So, it's to me that's the great relationship of a sales force with the retail account. And there's a lot of order taking that goes on, but there's also a lot of somebody bringing me something new and exciting and teaching me. And I think I never want to stop learning. So that's part of that relationship. And that's it.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, for me, finding educational resources, again, I about half of my distribution portfolio is Austrian, and I was not necessarily an Austrian expert when these relationships kind of formed. And I'll tell you what, the Austrian Trade Association website is phenomenal. To the point they have, and I'm going to pitch this to New York, because I'll tell you what, it's so
I've been
cool.
asking Sam about this for years.
The maps? Are you talking about the maps?
I keep bringing him the book.
Yeah. I mean, it's fantastic. Don't get me wrong.
You've done a great job, by the way.
Oh, thank you very much. Yes, I was going to say the reference guide. It's all right. It's a good read, and like I said, we will continue to update it, which is great. The Austrian site, you can GPS all the vineyards, right? And so you can zoom in on this GPS map and identify a single vineyard, and it gives you the soil type, the elevation, what grapes are planted there, every single vineyard in the country, right? And so there's really great resources out there to kind of continue the education for sure. And I will say, the New York Wine and Grape Foundation has just done a really wonderful job, my work aside, with compiling resources and on the website. And so I always encourage folks that if you do want to learn more about New York wine, there are resources available. And so, Matt, I want to check in with you. Last week we spoke a lot about your close connection with local producers, right? Where do the distributors come into play for you?
They play a huge role. At our store, because we stock between 2,000 and 3,000 items between wine and liquor, we really do rely on distributors to streamline a lot of that information. So, like Michael mentioned, we utilize Provi to place the bulk of our orders. We use Proof for Southern Glazers. Those things help speed up the reorders. And to echo Michael's point about trying new products, that's really where the value comes. So whether it's a winery doing a work with our sales rep, or just our sales reps really getting to know us, understanding our taste, what our strengths are at the store, what our interests are, and then curating a bag of wine for us. I mean, it's crazy when I tell civilians this, but I taste between 40 and 60 wines a week, because that's to our business, at least. It's so dynamic, and we rely so much on new items to really provide excitement, not only for ourselves, our staff, but to share with our customers. So distributors also really are key. They're helpful with transmitting pricing information, availability, stock issues, vintage changes. Those things are really critical. And if you have a good relationship, and I'm sure this has happened with Michael, where you get the heads up from one of your salespeople that, hey, there's only 20 cases left of this wine. I know you really have you've had a good run with it. You should, keep in mind your run rate and maybe stock up. Those things are really valuable to me as a retailer. So I will say it can be tough to work with. So we work with probably 70, last year we worked with 70 to 80 different distributors and importers. That's a lot. New York is blessed because we have such great, amazing access to wine. And it does provide, it's a lot of complexity because you are talking about a lot of different order minimums and a lot of different people who want to come in and see you. So I think really the key with working with distributors is having a really open, warm relationship and trying to understand that they have needs as well, and just setting appointments and trying new stuff with them. I think that really is critical because they're the ones that can give you a lot of information. They provide so much value, as well as providing even marketing angles. If you have an email newsletter, they might say, hey, I had another account down the road who ran a feature with this angle, right? Those things are really helpful. So I think distributors are really a key for us, and especially with New York wine. I mean, we work with some bigger wholesalers who represent Finger Lakes and New York wineries. We also work with some tiny little small distributors out of New York that sell Finger Lakes wineries. I would also mention, just to sort of tie together the two sides here, it's not just about being with a distributor and selling direct on your own. There is sort of a middle ground, and I think it could serve as maybe a training wheels or like a step towards that distribution direction. And that would be working with an independent contractor who sells and promotes your winery along with others. So up here in my neck of the woods in Rochester and the Finger Lakes, we work with a gentleman named Jamie Kelly, who he essentially is an independent contractor, and he sells wines on behalf of Scout, Nathan Kendall, Vice, Hector Wine Company, Ria's, a few others. And essentially, he doesn't buy and hold inventory. You maintain your margin as a winery, but you do pay a sales commission to the independent contractor. For most of the orders we place with Jamie, he hand delivers them, but for big orders, he will utilize trucking, like third-party trucking, if that's something that the winery has a program for. And it really does, I think it helps make the producer's life a little bit easier, especially these types of small mom and pop wineries who, are only making a few thousand cases and really don't have the resources to hire a full-time salesperson or get into a distributorship.
Dan, I think you're on mute.
Yep, the old mute. So I am very impressed, Matt. 70 distributor relationships. I have about probably 24 for my retail arm, and it's exhausting. That's a lot. I mean, you also have significantly more product depth, I think, than what I work with, but still, it is a lot of time. And, for some of them, I feel like I just have an email address, right? I don't really have a person, right? Or I get tossed around because, if you're not a high priority client for them, it's usually the first one in, first one out kind of thing with your new sales rep. But then I have other ones that just pick up the phone and call and just say, hey, Dan, how you doing? Right. And those are the ones that usually get my time in my business. And it is a lot of effort. And so, for me, starting out as a distributor here in London, I try not to waste anybody's time, I think is the most important thing. And so when I reach out, I'm reaching out with a purpose, with an idea, with an opportunity. And as I look at my stock levels, I say, oh, we've got maybe 100 bottles left. Valentine's Day is coming up. Maybe I can offer this exclusively to this person at a rate, and make an opportunity out of something like that. And, always just how can I help, right? How can we help each other? Seems to be working okay and building relationships for us, which is great. And so, yeah. So I think, we've identified some pain points. We've identified some success stories. What do we think and I'm going to open this to the group. What do we think, each link in the chain, right, between producer, distributor, retailer, what can each link offer to improve communications? What's missing? Anybody?
I'll go.
Thank you.
Then.
I know
and
I just hit you with a question. You got to think on it for a sec.
Yeah, so I opened up my notes from the last time that we all chatted, and I had written down some things that I think are really important to distribution. And so I'll just list off those things. And that is maybe not directly answering the question, but again, when you're coming from the distribution point of view and knowing the supplier point of view, because I've been on both sides, and what I've, distribution, like I said, it's not the easiest route, but it can be very, if you can be successful in it, it can change your business in a positive way, because we have, as a, for example, with RNDC, we have 70 sales reps throughout upstate New York. And so when you think about that, that's a really wide network. And so making sure that you can find the right reps to connect with and really grow your business, and maybe especially in some of those places where everyone isn't already going, like Rochester, really popular area for Finger Lakes wineries to target. So again, the four kind of pillars that I'm always pitching to any winery that I work with, any supplier that I work with, whether that's Finger Lakes or California or international, there are really four pillars that you really need to focus on to have a successful relationship, and to make that relationship smooth all the way from supplier to the store or restaurant. And those are strategy is number one. Like, you really have to think about strategy and come to the table with ideas, because I don't know about Matt and Michael, but I certainly am always getting, well, what do you think? Well, what do you think? What should we do? And while I absolutely want to provide my expertise, I need something to look at first to tell you how to pivot. So what are you thinking first? And think in a calendar year. So strategy, let me list them off first. Sorry, I'm getting a little roundabout. Strategy, communication, relationships, and consistency. And when I say consistency, I mean consistency working in the wholesale market. Yes, of course, you need to have consistent product. If you don't have consistent product, then you need to take a couple steps back and figure that out before you're trying to go to market. But assuming and knowing that the consistency of New York wines is very good these days, those are the four things that I would say you need to really focus on. And when it talks, people are like, okay, strategy, what does that mean? So you really need to plan. That is so important. And the Finger Lakes and New York State wine industry as a whole has always been kind of reactive rather than proactive. And I know, part of the Wine and Grape Foundation and the Wine Alliance and all of these great organizations that have really made a lot of progressive changes in the last 10 years are helping us to become more of a proactive, but it's still a very reactive industry. And so planning, like, somebody will come to me and want a price change or a new item or something like that, and they want it done like tomorrow. And in my world, I have a lot of different moving parts. I need like 60 to 90 days advance notice to be able to properly implement new pricing, new items. And it's for a number of reasons. It's not just because I'm busy, which that is a reason, but you guys all know we have state filing dates. So that's really important to work back from. And if you're giving me a price increase, then I need to look at how much inventory I have on hand. What's the current velocity? How is that going to change when the price changes? And at what, you know, what percent of business are we potentially going to lose because of a price increase? And then again, on the other side, how quickly could the inventory that I have turn into aged inventory if we have a higher price now? And then on the flip side, if you're giving me a lower price on an item that's already performing well, then okay, I need to go back and I need to change my projections, because now we're looking at increased velocity and how quickly am I going to run through the product? And do we have the product placed somewhere where if we run out, we're going to lose the placement? So there's a lot of back of the house that happens, and a retailer is thinking about all these things too. You know, we have something we call ups and down sheets looking specifically at pricing. So a customer can look at this and see all of the products that they're currently buying at this price are now going up or down to this price. And now they have to sit there and think about how that affects all of the flow in their store too. So we really have to, and if you take one thing away from this, I would say the planning. Plan out, plan 90 days in advance. Like right at this point, you should have a full calendar planned out for the year. It's not written in stone. It can shift and change, but you should know what your focus is for Q1, 2, 3, and 4. And what items you want to maybe do a pricing special on, or what items you want to maybe get people from the winery and go out and do a little blitz on, and then consider what the selling cycle is like in distribution. So maybe not everybody on this call knows, like for Q1, for the first quarter of the year, we do the least amount of sales of the whole year. And when you're looking at H1 versus H2, it's probably like something like 30% in H1, 40% in H1, 60 to 70% in H2. And then when you're getting really down into it, then we're seeing the majority of the H2 sales happening in October, November, December. So thinking about those things, and then, you know, I still have people, and again, both from New York State, from the country, from the world, that today on February 5th, I still don't have goals for, I still don't have a plan, and people are wanting to make that happen. And now it's looking like, you know, if I'm getting somebody's plan today, now I have to go back and figure out how we're going to implement this plan, how we're going to catch up from January and February, because we're not going to be able to really kick this plan off until March. So you really need to be doing things backwards. Let's say in your mind, you're like, I have a new rosé that I'm going to introduce into the market. So I want to do that in March. So then go back 90 days from that. And at the very minimum, 90 days is when you should be telling your distributor that you have this new item that you want to introduce in April. Maybe that answered. I hope that gives some insight. But
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Plan.
Yeah, my to-do list is increasing as we go through this chat, and I'm like, oh God, rosé season. I'm already 60 days behind.
Crazy.
Dan,
yeah, please.
Okay, so I have a number, and I'm going to potentially ramble on, so cut me off. And this jumps right on the conversation, the great points that we just made from obviously a very prominent distributor. So as we just learned, the slowest quarter for wholesale and certainly for purchasing is the first quarter of the year. So what I would recommend, if I was a person, a consultant to all of you about wholesale to retail, would be I would take all of your wines and put them on one case. Meaning, if you sell something on 5 cases, $120 wholesale, make it one case. Build distribution in January and February. Guess what? All of the big guys, all the big suppliers do that, and they're starting to do that more and more and more because our cash flow is horrible. Credit lines are expensive, if not, and sometimes not available. We're paying off our December bills still. You know, some December 31st bills are due like today. So think about this. Our January is one of the slowest months. So if you could get distribution, get new, let the sales rep spend time in January going into account and saying, hey, I got this great wine and it's only on one case. It's usually on 2 or 3. Great time to try something new and get new things on the shelf. I also believe strongly there should be lower quantities across the board. If I was in a distributor and I was selling New York State wines and I sell 5,000 and I make 5,000 cases of wine, I would be on one case. I see too many 5 and 10 case and even 3 case deals on wines that do not turn. They don't have that kind of volume. And so a store owner like myself, particularly in January and February when things start to slow up, we don't have the cash flow to continue re-inventorying things, and you cut out things that sadly are less of a priority. Even though we love those wines, we need to carry other things to keep the lights on and whatnot. I also believe from a standpoint of success, we all know that the industry is having some troubles. Wine sales are down nationally. Liquor sales are down. We hear all the negative reports, but there are some bright spots. So, for instance, when I talk to all the suppliers and wholesalers, they'll tell me New Zealand Sauvignon Blancs are still doing well. Sauvignon Blancs in general are doing well. So tell us the success stories. There's wines in your portfolio potentially, and I'm speaking directly to, let's say, the wineries and the wholesalers about this. If there's successful wines in a particular winery, let's say if a winery makes 8 wines and one of them is doing great, find out the reason, tell us, convey it to us. Just like shockingly, I said last week, Sauvignon Blancs from California, they were ripping up all those vines and making Cabernet. Now everybody wants Sauvignon Blanc. It's a flavor profile that people seems to sing to people. People are looking for crisper whites. They're looking for lighter reds, whites that they could chill. All these different things. The industry is forever moving, and the nice thing about being able to speak to all of you on a very local level is you guys have this information, you feel it, you hear it, and I think that is exceptionally important to convey to retailers. And then price. If something is a price point that you feel it can be successful, or say, I think you could elevate your category by selling this and teaching us, explaining to us, there's all that is so helpful. When it comes to items like regionality, I mean, is certain wines in particular parts of the state, do they do better? Talk to us about that. Say, listen, in Manhattan, I noticed Cap Franc or Riesling seems to be taking off over the last 18 months. Let's talk about it. I think that's so helpful. Tell us what's going on in restaurants. Are the restaurants reacting to it? Is there by the glass pours? I think all this conveys to great storytelling, success. And sometimes if you tell me, Michael, there's 5 restaurants in within a quarter of a mile of your store that people are loving these wines and reordering them, maybe it's time for me to give this a second look, or there's opportunity here. So I think the fact that we all are in this together and we actually can develop these kind of relationships can be very helpful. So that would be my 2 cents or more.
Maybe Chad or Yancey, you guys want to jump in? A lot of great ideas kind of flowing around. Is there anything you guys are cooking up, especially this time of year, where we can, again, kind of just make everybody's life easier?
I will say, going back to your original question about what's missing for me as a self-distributor, it's so different from the structure that Katie's describing. I've got my one line of products and my set of people I'm going to. I've being very aware as a winery owner of how busy everybody is. I've tended to be hesitant to be in touch too often. I don't want the stores or restaurants to feel like I'm always, do you need anything more? What can I do for you? But I'm hearing here that I need to be in touch more, not less. And that's very good to know. And also, I think it's important that it not always be, do you need to reorder? But I have, some new ideas for you, or something new coming down the line, or is there anything you need that I may be able to help with? So I'm learning from the discussion. And also, it was very interesting what Michael was just saying about Q1, as we're calling it. I think of February and March and into April and September, October as my sort of wholesale seasons, because they're the times that I find people, maybe there isn't the cash flow yet, but people are thinking about, okay, we've been selling a lot of reds. Now it's time to shift towards whites or rosés. So I find that's the right time where I have the most success reaching out. Midsummer, people have things in place and aren't as interested generally, I find, in something new. So it's important for me to really set aside the time and focus in those two seasons.
Chad, I saw you you wanted to jump in there too.
Well, I mean, not to piggyback on what Katie said, but I think she kind of nailed it, in at least in the world that I live in with wholesale. I mean, planning is really the key, but the best laid plan is always going to change, and I think that that's something that we all need to remind ourselves of as you go in and you have a really well laid out plan, and you have a strategy for the year. I guarantee you it's going to change day one. So you need to be nimble and creative and have alternative ideas on how to accomplish, if not that same goal, a similar goal. To jump into timing, Q1 for me is a lot of ride withs, a lot of work withs. And I don't really always hit on every account that we stop at this time of year, right? Cash flow is low for a lot of people, but again, it's the time that frankly I have to give as well to see suppliers, to see buyers, or excuse me, not suppliers, but our wholesalers and the reps and the liquor store owners, right? They have a little time to give right now. So I'm going to be working all day today in White Plains, which is really the whole area around here, which I don't normally get an opportunity to do. So this time of year is a time for me to tackle those goals. Next month is all on premise for me, or at least I try to make it all on premise because it's menus, right? I'm trying to get our product on menus, and that's the time to do it. And frankly, my planning in January is for March to try and figure out areas that we did well in last year and where we can move forward and see growth this year. And a lot of that for our winery is on premise. The restaurants move a lot of our product, and then I'll take what's the success that I see on premise and I try and convey that to the off premise market as well. That's a great sales tool for us. So if I have a particular restaurant that's pouring through, 10 cases a month of our Riesling, and there's a wine shop right down the road, I make sure that wine shop knows that our wine is successful in that restaurant. That really helps, move the needle on the off-premise market as well. But yeah, I mean, planning really is the key for me, and stay consistent, right? Like try and stick with that plan the best you can. I know it's very vague, but that's the truth, right? You get a game plan going, expect it to change, and have the ability to make that change, right? Is key. I find it fascinating, like when I listen to Yancey, right? Part of me is a little envious where you get the ability to kind of go in and say, I hope you like our wine. Here's your cases, and you're off to the bank. It is a lot different when you work with a wholesaler, right? You need to plan with the wholesaler. You need to plan with the regional reps. You need to plan with that particular salesperson. They all need to be in sync. You need to be in sync with them. And again, expect that change to happen because it will happen. One other thing I'd like to bring up, and I know this really isn't on topic, but one of the things that I think that if you do enter a relationship with a particular wholesaler, be very smart about the initial contracts with that relationship, right? Especially outside of New York State, they all change. Inside of New York State, make sure that you're both in a position that you're comfortable with. Pay attention to billing, right? Again, we work with a very large distributor, and there's billing mistakes all the time. No fault of theirs or ours, but those little things will add up in a big way at the end of the year. So make sure people are paying attention to that. And again, just have thick skin, because you get a lot of no's. So
Yeah, that is that and that and that's everybody. I mean, it's for me building, our portfolio. The toughest conversations are between me as distributor and the producer to say, listen, you really have to have very frank conversations about where that RRP is going to come in, right? And if you just don't think it's going to work, you just can't do it, and so especially here, and I think this is probably similar to New York City, where there's so much, right? There's just so much available, and there's so much noise. And so, coming in at that right price to be successful is 90% of the battle, right? And so we really work hard with very detailed, complicated spreadsheets to figure out, how we think we're going to do with a wine just based on its price. Matt, I see a lot of nodding, which is good. I think we might be onto something here. Oh, RRP, sorry, SRP, suggested retail price. The recommended retail price, RRP, for London here. But and I see some other comments about Matt and Michael. You guys are obviously in support of New York wine, right? But at the end of the day, how do we cut through the noise with these products? And I guess I'm looking for the magic bullet here for folks that are, especially in New York City. When I was there, I felt like people weren't in New York City to drink New York State wine. They were in New York City to drink the great wines of the world because there's access to them there. And so, what do you do in that situation?
Well, I love this conversation, and trust me, retailers are also looking for the same magic bullet, right? Like I can say personally, I love all the wines that we buy for the store, and it's really hard to give them all the attention they each individually deserve. So I really do think I love the concept of initiative and planning, because I know there's there's several Finger Lakes wineries who are really proactive with not just outreach via email and stopping in, but they'll say, hey, Matt, we're going to host a happy hour at the restaurant right down the road. I know you carry our wines. Would you want to be a retail partner and maybe invite your customers? Those have been really successful. And if someone offers that to me as a winery, that's you're doing my job for me, right? You're giving me that creative idea. You're giving me an opportunity to provide value to my customers. Beside that, I really think nowadays with social media, I'm not just going to say use social media, but I would say be very tactical and research in your area. Look at the food and beverage influencers and see, who they're working with, where they shop, where they drink, where they eat. Those are the kind of accounts that you want to pursue because they typically also have social media presence. I can say that I'd say half of our social media content is just reposting someone else's video or posts, using user-generated content where one of our customers posts something about a wine, oftentimes Finger Lakes wine, a small winery that is making something really interesting, and they post it and then we share it, and we really didn't have to do any work. So I think it's really getting in the weeds, and we all want to scale. I know myself, I always want to find that, if I just do this once, I can repeat it 10 times. And it is very difficult to make that happen. So the other point I wanted to make, I think the strength with New York wine and what I've seen here in the Finger Lakes is the ability for producers to collaborate together. And we talked about this on the pre-chat, but the Finger Lakes Wine Alliance does a really nice job of hosting a road trip where they invite trade buyers, whether it's retail buyers or restaurant buyers, out to the wineries, and they make 3 stops. You're in a limo, and they make 3 stops, and there's a different theme at each winery, and there's maybe 8 to 10 different wineries pouring at each stop. And that's great because it's networking. You get to see new releases. You really maximize your time as a buyer, which we're all short on. And I think it lifts all boats. And I wouldn't think of it as I would say focus on finding your neighbors and those who you think there's synergy with in your region, and really work hard to partner with them, because they have their audience, you have your audience, you can share audiences. And I've seen a lot of success at our store just by attending these events and being a part of them as well. So that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah. No, the social media bit is huge. I mean, you know, both for my retail and wholesale arm, I'm constantly reminding, you know, my producers that make sure your content is shareable, right? Sometimes you get to settings where you try and share something and they just don't allow you to do that. Make sure, you know, you're putting this stuff out there, and you really want, you know, your partners to be able to grab it and amplify it. And so we're constantly just saying, you know, like, tag us in things, you know, if you're tinkering with a blend, like, talk to us about it, right? And those are the kind of things that we want to kind of pull back the curtain on and share with our you know, with our audience. For me as a retailer, social media, particularly Instagram, is my number 1 channel to communicate with my customers. So Michael, how you doing? I saw you come in before. I wanted to see if you wanted to share anything.
So one point, a question and a point. First, the point: combo cases. We all know what they are. If you have 3 cases of Riesling at $120, $10 wholesale bottle, and you have a semi-dry Riesling and a dry, and you sell both of them, some wholesalers, by obviously a relationship with their supplier, make combo cases. They'll give you 6 Riesling dry, 6 sweet at the best price. Very good success story. And I think it was October, I bought the 2 Dr. Frank semi-dry and dry twice. I ended up buying 3 cases of the dry once because of the success. So it's less of investment. I find that's very helpful. So anybody's with certainly a large distributor, that's another, I think, tool. So then I want to ask you something. This alludes to New York City. We have every day an event that's going on, whether it's an Italian Brunello thing, I think is this week, yesterday or the day before was the Cab Franc from New York State. How do you find these events work? Was the Cab Franc well attended yesterday or whatever it was? I was traveling, so I wasn't able to make it. I would have loved to. But I feel specifically in New York City, we are overwhelmed with wine events. Buyers, store owners, restaurants seem to just shun these things because they don't have the time, maybe. I'd love to hear about this. Like, do you find this successful? Is this a good way of building customer awareness, buyer awareness, maybe even consumer awareness? What are the thoughts on this from you and everybody else? I think this is so important because I feel like there's a lot of resources being spent on this kind of stuff. And I don't know how successful it is if it's not. Maybe I'm just burnt out from going to these over the years. I'm just being honest with you. And I think it's important that you hear from what I'm hearing from most people. They just, you could go 3 times a day to some wonderful wine events in New York and not hit them all.
I was at the one yesterday, the Cabernet Franc event, which is why I'm so hoarse today. I was shouting for 7 hours over a large crowd. So I would say it was pretty much a terrific success. And I think that's partly because it was the first time in since before the pandemic, that New York State wines were presented direct to the trade public and the public in New York City. So this is, as far as I've been concerned, long overdue. And, hats off to I've been part of a group called the Hudson Valley Cabernet Franc Coalition for about 8 years. That's been promoting Cab Franc as a terrific grape for the Hudson Valley. But the guys who are now taking it to the state level puts it on a bigger stage, and it's a win for everybody. And they brought a lot of smarts and money and ideas to the table, so they put it together very professionally. And I think the combination of having hours open to the trade and then some hours open to the general public means that you're raising the profile of your wineries and your products to the public. And, I personally bring a list of which stores people can find my wines in New York City. So I was showing that to a lot of people in the evening. I want to, I had one very nice direct conversation with a woman who lives on the Upper East Side and didn't know of any good stores in her immediate neighborhood. I have one that carries me that I think is a terrific small wine store. It was maybe 10 blocks from her. So, she wrote down dutifully the name and address. There are a lot of opportunities for kind of cross promotion. And there was a surprising number of people from, new wine bars, restaurants, stores. The frustration for me is that I don't know exactly how many wineries there were, but there were a lot, and a lot of them are much bigger than I am. So, nobody goes to every table. So, you look at the list and you think, oh, I can talk to this person, this person, this person. There were some very big players that were on the list to attend, big restaurants, big stores. But you're not going to see them all. Anyway, maybe it's because New York State doesn't do it very often, but it was very successful.
And so, Yancey, there was a kind of section time for trade and then for consumers. Is that how they did it?
Yeah, it was a very long section for the trade, which is really why my voice is so shot. It was 11 to 4. And then we had a 2-hour break, and 6 to 8 was consumers.
Okay.
And there were, in the hundreds of both.
Do you think we could share the portfolios that were represented there? I think there was some very good quality images of Cab Franc itself. Was there any sort of PR or anything connected that maybe stores can connect and like Matt says, repost these? But I'd love to know what wineries were there. I did get an invite from a couple of winemakers that I have relationships with, but I really, frankly, so who sponsors this? Is this the same foundation? Is it a different foundation? So these are all the things that I myself, we would happily repost and send out these invites to these events on our LinkedIn and our social media anytime. So that would be anything we'd happy to do. Okay. I'd love to know more about who went, and I think it's exciting that so what I think is fascinating to me, not to jump in here, is that we now are, so it seems like we're keying on a particular varietal that New York does very well, right? And I think that's masterful. So like when you go to Burgundy, in France, you're going to get Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. There's a little bit of other things, but that's basically the laws and the rules. I love if Oregon, we know, is known for Pinot Noir, right? Yes, they do make some other good things, but my point is, I think I love that, and I think if that's a head banner of this in itself, and even my own self, I'm envisioning like an area in the store, maybe displaying. Have you thought about Cab Franc and put some of your signage up? And if there's things that are reproduced from the organization, what about Cab Franc? Because as a retailer, most guys don't have a Cab Franc section, and most customers don't ask for Cab Franc. But maybe we should be thinking about Cab Franc. When I think of Cab Franc, I think of Bordeaux primarily. It's never really been that successful from the West Coast. So just this is me brainstorming and trying to get people to embrace something different. So that marketing on the ground, that kind of conversation, it sounds great to me. So I'm always open to it.
Michael,
I will definitely make sure that the some of the links get sent to you. They do have a PR arm. I'm not one of the, I think it's something like 8 or 10 wineries that created this Cab Franc Forward is what it's called. So, and they've, I think, organized as a not-for-profit, and really are trying to take over the world.
I saw that it was picked
but,
up by the New York Times, so they're
Really?
doing something
Oh,
right
yeah,
in terms
Florence
of
Fabricant.
press.
Yeah, she was there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Katie, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, just to the point of this awesome tasting where you saw tons of people, there were lots of wineries, there was a lot of wholesale there. I just want to make the point that, and somebody I saw in the chat asked about how successful it was, and so I just want to make the point that the success of a tasting event like this is not necessarily just measured by the amount of people that are in the room, but it is the most important piece of these things is follow up and follow through on the part of the winery. And I say this as somebody who used to work for a third party marketing association and had a lot of people after events say, well, where are my sales? Where, this event was supposed to bring me sales. And the third party organization, the marketing organization, is there to execute the event. They are not there to execute sales. That is on you as the winery. So anybody that was participating in that event, and especially my wineries, which I'm sure you guys all have emails typed up to me with your lists of who you talk to and who you need to follow up with. But that is, as a winery, that is how you make it successful, and that is how you turn it into sales. None of those buyers are coming back to ask you again about your pricing. None of those buyers are coming back to say, hey, I told you I like this wine. Are you going to bring it to me? That is not how it works. You got to push the rock uphill, and you have to be the squeaky wheel that goes back and says, hey, you said you were considering this for your buy the glass. How do we make that happen? What do I need to do? Do you need to taste it again? Do you need staff training? What can I do to make this placement happen? It's not just going to happen. So the event is there to give you the platform and to give you the opportunity, but it is up to you to be the one that writes it down, writes down the contact information, writes down the price points they're looking for, writes down the specific information that they need and that your sales team needs, that your distributor needs, to go back and say, hey, you saw so-and-so from this winery, you liked their Cab Franc, you said you wanted to bring it on. And also knowing, again, Chad has said a lot, you have to have thick skin. You really do. Like, if you hear yes, you can be excited. If you hear no, don't get discouraged. It's just like, whoop, there it goes. Heard a no, heard a yes. All right, catch it. Heard a no, keep on moving on. And always, something I learned early on, no means not right now. And if you follow up once and it doesn't work, like, this is marketing 101. How many times does a person have to see a logo or a brand to remember that? It's a lot of times. It used to be something like a minimum of 7, but that's like when I was in college. So it's probably more like 24 now. So you have to be willing to hear no over and over and over again until you hear yes. I know in my experience, I've had sales conversations that have taken years to come back around, but when they finally come back around, it's really worthwhile. So I just always go back to that person. Maybe it's every 6 months, maybe it's every once a year. Hey, haven't talked to you in a while, got some new stuff. Because if you, again, that comes back to one of my 4 pillars, consistency. If you continually show up and show them that you're a consistent presence in the market and a consistent consistent presence for them, then eventually they're going to come around and say, you know, like it might even be because they're annoyed. Who cares? You know, like, oh my God, this person has called me 75 times. I'm just going to give the wine a chance so they don't keep calling me. That's a win. It's a win.
Be the person that somebody wants to get rid of.
So
I mean, the squeaky wheel gets the oil, right? You can't, it always does.
we
we
did
had
part
a
of the
question-
Cat forward thing yesterday as well, and my big takeaway was the stack of cards that I got, right? I mean, that's how I'm going to follow up and try and make those sales. But it was I felt like it was really successful. Frankly, the portion with just the everyday folks was fantastic. There was a huge buzz about Cab Franc with the people in the room, and there was probably, I don't know, maybe 250 people. I felt like every one of them was at the booth, so it was great, honestly. I hope we do this again. Cab Franc is definitely a product that is sellable. It's a strong tool in my toolkit. So it was great, fantastic, long day, but well worth it. So I also, if I may, I had noticed there's some talk about wigs in the chat box there, and I think that we're all reluctant to see that move forward, right? I think that, like, I'll speak to Lakewood. We've got a great relationship with all these retailers, and it's taken a long time to establish those relationships, and we don't want to see that end. So we'd like to continue on the path that we're on. And I think we all, the majority of us could agree on that. So
Yeah, I would
yeah,
like to interject on that going back a number of years, there was an organizing effort to bring small producers, New York producers, together with the Metro Package Store organization and others to go to Albany, to write letters, to help organize against it. Because I know I will lose if that goes through, personally, as a small producer. My wines are not going to sell in grocery stores. They're just not.
I want to invite Sam Filler to address it from the perspective of the New York Wine and Grape Foundation. How you doing, Sam?
Good. How are you, Dan?
Another day in paradise.
One thing I just want to make clear is that the New York Wine and Grape Foundation is not an advocacy organization. We don't get involved in public policy. So the organization will not be involved in any efforts to support or oppose wigs. Our job, we're funded by the state of New York, is to promote the industry. And so our job is to identify those available places where New York wines can have the greatest success. And as it stands right now, retail shops are one of the only legal places where wines can be sold. So, Michael knows, I met him at our grand tasting, I don't know, 2017, 2018. And this webinar today has been a kind of long overdue, but long in process. The Metro Package Association and the New York State Retailers Association all work with the Vandervoort Group. And so I've been in constant communication with them about how do we work better with retailers to, bridge the gap between our members and what, they're interested in educational efforts. So this webinar today is an example of us trying to build that bridge stronger between our producers and the retailers, because I think a really positive thing about New York State is we have a very vibrant, independent wine retailer sector, and that means, I think there was some stat put out there many years ago that the number of SKUs listed with the SLA New York is like triple what you see in Florida or other states that do have wine and grocery stores. So we're blessed with really a great diversity of wines from a lot of places, and it's helpful to have independent retailers who are going to curate a selection. And so that, I think, provides a lot of opportunities, and it's in our interest to form positive relationships with them and make sure that we're educating them and working with them to reach the customers we all want to be selling to.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Katie, I have a question for you. How many different New York State producers are in the portfolio? Ballpark.
Ballpark off the top of my head, probably, I think I have about, let me think, 10.
Okay. How do you make sure everybody gets their moment in the sun? And how does everybody get along? How do you manage the relationship within the portfolio? And I'm asking personally just because I have several Austrian producers, right? There is some overlap. We try and find kind of everybody's specialty, not necessarily specialty, but focal point. What are your best practices?
So I really like to, especially in the Metro New York area, I advocate for my wineries to work together and hit the market together, to share not only in the cost, but also in the wines that they're showing. And I'm really lucky, the wineries that I represent, I have all Finger Lakes, one Lake Erie. And so we're really lucky in the New York State wine industry that there's such camaraderie, like true camaraderie among producers. People tell me all the time, they have been for 14 years, that is not the way other industries operate and other regions operate. So we're really lucky in that. And when I was on the supplier side and working with a large wholesaler, prior to working with O-Pee-Chee, I found success in creating a coalition of wineries that went down into the market consistently. And I went with one other person, and we showed about 4 different wineries wines, and it wasn't a Jamie Kelly situation. This was just like, hey, we're all distributed by the same distributor. Let's cover more ground. And when we go into the market, I'll show your wines, you show my wines, and then that way we can just cover more ground. So I have been advocating for my wineries to do that as well, and they are all very open to it. And some of this has happened already. So, it doesn't make a ton of sense to do it necessarily right in the region outside of where the wineries are. But when we're thinking of heading to Buffalo, heading to Albany, heading to Metro New York, and knowing that it is not easy to get there all of the time, but we need consistency in our representation, sharing that load with somebody else is really beneficial. And then you come in because a store might take in a couple of SKUs. But when we're talking on premise, and again, that's where I recommend my wineries focus in Metro New York, because the majority of small wine shops now, and I'm not talking about like Michael's store, for example, or Matt's store, because they hand sell products. They have, they hand sell quality products, but the majority of stores in Metro New York, I mean, who's been in the market, it's just wine and liquor store, wine and liquor store, wine and spirits, wine and spirits. Most of them don't even have like an actual name attached to them. And they sell these little, it's a tiny store carved out of a neighborhood block, and they mostly sell on brand. They mostly sell on big box brand that somebody is coming in and looking for, especially, let's say, for example, Midtown Manhattan, where you're going to have a lot of tourists. They're coming in and they know a brand, and so they grab it. There's not a whole lot of hand selling there. So I direct my people to focus in the on-premise in Metro New York, which again is difficult, and it does take a lot of time and a lot of repeat visits. But when you're looking at on-premise, most of the time they're not going to take on more than one SKU from one brand. So when you walk into an on-premise account and you have 2 of your own wines and 2 of somebody else's wines, and all 4 are different varietals, then you have a really good chance of them saying, I'll pick up one from brand A and one from brand B. And so that is really the approach that I am urging my people to have. And this last year there was a lot of change that happened. And, coming off of COVID still, like, we're not seeing people get down to the city as much. I'm hoping that this year I can work with my wineries and have them coming down on a consistent basis and doing that same thing. So I get to, we kind of get to have a blitz without it being a formal blitz, because we have 3 different reps from 3 different wineries all carrying each other's wines. So it's kind of like a loophole. I get away with a blitz without calling it a blitz. And I would also focus, on specific teams because, we have an on-premise division now. There are 10 teams within that division, and really where we're looking for Finger Lakes wines, where they're the most accepted, I would say, would be Manhattan and Brooklyn, especially Brooklyn, and to really focus on those specific teams and keep going back to the same people because they have large runs. And if you can get a success story and you show them that you're willing to help them out, the sales rep that is, then when you come back into town, they're going to say, hey, I need you to go here, here, and here. And another really important thing is making sure you're getting the experience presenting to the on-premise in Metro New York and knowing how to do that. Most of the on-premise in Metro New York are very knowledgeable wine people. So you don't need to go in and say, all the technical things about it. You just kind of need to, and for people that are knowledgeable wine people in retail too, it's more like, here are the wines, you tell me what you think. And if you have questions, I can answer them, but not trying to do necessarily a full sales pitch. So that's what I'm working on with my people.
It's great. Thank you. Well, we are at time, and we didn't get to do our kind of roundtable moment of Zen, closing thoughts, but we're back at the end of this month. I'm off to Wine Paris next week, and so we'll with New York State Wine, and I'm very excited to be running the booth there, and then we'll come back and collect our thoughts for our final session and take away some of the conversations that we had last week and today, and see if we can put together a really useful 90 minutes for everybody. If participants have questions that they'd like to see answered in the final session, please don't hesitate to email them into the New York Wine and Grape Foundation. You can send them to Jennifer Cooper at nywgf.org, and we'll be sure to tackle those. I want to thank all of the panelists, Katie, Matt, Chad, Yancey, and Michael. Thanks, Sam, for coming in and speaking with us. We really appreciate it. I hope everybody has a great rest of the day. Thank you so much.